And Dr. Heiser talks about how, as he often does, Genesis 1 through 11 is a polemic of later Babylonian creation and flood stories, and therefore, most likely 1 through 11 was written during the Babylonian exile. I was telling my wife this, and she asked, why couldn't it be the other way around? I didn't have an answer. I've heard from nearly every scholar that Genesis is a polemic of the Mesopotamian stories, but I honestly don't know why. Couldn't someone just as easily say Genesis 1 through 11 was written first and those stories are polemics of Genesis? What are the reasons this is not the case?
Because the Babylonian material is demonstrably older by a long shot. Let's just take, broadly speaking, you've got creation stories from, that are Sumerian, others that are going to be Akkadian. All of this, it sort of gets lumped together. It's Mesopotamian material, whether it's Akkadian from the Babylonian period or whatever, some other period than Sumerian. So the Sumerian, Mesopotamian, Sumerian, Akkadian stuff about creation stories that have parallels, or not, parallels is a fair word in some cases, but that somehow have a literary or a conceptual, worldview correspondence to stuff in Genesis 1 through 11. Is centuries, even millennia older than the biblical material. So it can't work the other way around. Now, if we narrow that to, let's just say, Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation story that is essentially written to glorify Marduk. Now, if you believe that, even if you believe that, let's say that Genesis 1 through 11 was written by Moses. So let's just give it a round number, 1500 BC. That would be 900, to maybe 1,000 years earlier than the Marduk story. Okay, that would be the case. Now, that still doesn't help because a lot of the details of the Marduk story are older than that. It's just that in this particular creation story, the details are changed and manipulated to make Marduk the greatest of all gods and all that kind of stuff. So there are still threads, even in that later text, that predate the biblical material. If you're with most scholars, and I've said before, I think Genesis 1 through 11 was either probably a combination, composed and heavily edited during the exile, specifically to respond to the theology of the captors of the two tribes there held in Babylon. If you believe that, then the creation story, Enuma Elish, again, the Marduk creation story, and the Hebrew Bible, specifically this material in Genesis 1 through 11, is really coming into being at roughly the same time. So it would be you're not even really helped by that, because then you have to assume, and this is my second trajectory on this, why would we assume that an elite scribal class of Mesopotamians feel it's worth their time at all to respond to something a captive Jewish scribe is writing? You only do polemic if you think something is a threat to you. If you're the Babylonians and the Jews are your captives, they're not going anywhere without your permission. And who's paying attention to what they do religiously? We're living in Babylon. It's not like the Jews have either the ability in terms of production or the permission to write something down and then distribute it throughout the empire. And then Babylonian scribes look at that and go, oh boy, we need to respond to this. It doesn't make any sense. They're not going to care one whit about what a bunch of captives are writing about their own theology and their own history. So, looking at it in reverse just doesn't make any sense. You have the chronological problem with the material from the get-go, but even if it was contemporaneous, and some of it is, but not a whole lot of it, why would an empire power like Babylon care about responding to the literature of a captive people? There'd be no need. We're not afraid of your God. You're sitting here in Babylon. Our God conquered your God. Why should we care what you're writing? So it just doesn't make sense, either chronologically or sort of in the circumstances of the day.